yes, I mean, the work I'm doing is the work looking at whether whether dogs and cats have these capacities. And one quite fun thing is, of course, there's a wealth of research in children, pre-verbal children, so 1 to 2 year old kids, looking at empathy development. So I can, because they're pre-verbal, they are, they're not, lots of empathy research in humans is all about self-report, the typical psychology stuff. You tell us what you're thinking and what you're feeling. But of course, you can't do that with little kids, because if they can't tell you, then they can't. So they have to get a bit more clever with designing experiments which use their behavior and their actions. And luckily, we can use those same experiments then in non-verbal non-humans, so cats and dogs. So that's one aspect of what I've done, which was experiments done in 2013 in children, where the experimenter faked a knee injury as if they'd banged their knee and were really in pain. And they watched what the little kids did in response to that. And if the kids went up to the person and said, and patted their shoulder or gave them a toy or rubbed their knee, they called that empathy. And they showed that children developed empathy anywhere between 18 months and 2 years of age, which was fun for me, because when I started this PhD, I had an 18-month-old daughter, and I watched her go through all the stages of that study, which was quite fun as she grew up. But so I've co-opted that study, and I've done the same thing in dogs and cats with their owners. So it's a bonded human rather than a stranger, faking a knee injury. And I've filmed the dogs and cats. So I wasn't in the room. So I wasn't hopefully making too much of a confound in that regard. And filmed what the cats and dogs did in response, which is hilarious, as you can imagine. People are surprisingly good. I've asked people to be as method as they can in their acting, because they're doing, visual, they're doing sound, but I want them to smell in distress as well. It's quite hard to act to smell, but dogs and cats, of course, they use their sense of, because sometimes they use their sense of smell hugely in assessing their world and understanding their world. And so we definitely are letting off pheromones when we feel emotions, right? And there is a lovely study done by the Hungarian crew where they got people, I think, sadness, fear, a few other emotions, and they got swabs from under their arms. And then they just showed those swabs to dogs, and they looked at laterality, which nostril they sniffed at, because depending on which nostril, there's a crossover in the brain as to which side of the brain the processing is happening on. And emotions are more processed, or negative emotions are more likely to be processed on one side of the brain than the other. So they could show that they were using that nostril to sniff the negative emotion swabs.
God, and do you know, I've instantly thought of this little joke about two dogs, and one of them going up to the ear and sniffing in the other, saying, "Do you sniff with your right nostril there, you old softy? God, there you go."